Welcome to another edition of Trail Runner Nation. My name is Don Freeman.
And I am a Scott War, and we're so excited today because we're going to talk with one of our friends that we haven't talked to in a long, long time, Jimmy Dean Freeman. Before we get into the topic at hand and introducing Jimmy, we just want to say Jimmy's down in Southern California. We're sitting here at the 14th of January and right in the middle of the fires. We want to see, Jimmy, what do you see? How are you doing? Is your family, friends, are they safe?
All of our family and friends are safe and accounted for. And, you are in the middle of a massive, traumatic, catastrophic natural disaster. You start to sort of take stock of what the most important things are.
Yeah.
And we're very close to 24 families that have lost everything, every physical possession. And it's one of those things where, we take for granted our health. We take for granted our relationships, and we have relationships with people, and we also have relationships with physical things. And, my relationship with the mountains here, the Santa Monica Mountains, is a very intimate and important relationship in my life. It's been the source of a lot of mental well-being and struggle and resilience over the last 18 to 20 years. And we've lived through all these fires: the Springs fire, the Wolseley fire, the Station fire. All of those were close to home. All of those touched some trails that were very meaningful and important to me, but this one was in my backyard. And the fire got within 2.5 miles of us, and we're not out of the woods yet. We're still in a ready yellow evac area, and the mandatory evac area is north of Sunset Boulevard in our neighborhood, and we're 1 mile from that. So it's been a crazy week. And while all of the important stuff is accounted for, the people that I know and the relationships and the families are all safe. You also look at when a home is lost, that's our history. That's like all of the sentimental things that we're attached to that tell our story are gone. And when the Palisades lost the entire neighborhood, the restaurants, the grocery stores, the kids that I coach in baseball, they go to Palisades Elementary. That school's gone. The school my kids are supposed to go to, the high school, burned significantly. So Palisades High School burned, and you guys have all seen the everybody listening to this has seen the pictures. It's just, it's wiped out a town. And there's been a lot of back and forth, and the thing that hurts as much as seeing these families suffer is seeing the back and forth vitriol and politicization of a tragedy. It's like stuff about rich people losing their homes and they still have money. And I know a lot of normal people that lived in that neighborhood that are really going to struggle for a bit to, pay a mortgage on a pile of ashes. And so, if anything else, this week has been sad, but also it's shown a very positive side of humanity that you don't see, and that's the people that are adjacent to all these areas and all the people that their instinct and impulse was to reach out and help. And the kids that I know that lost their neighborhood, the little league that I coach for is working to replace all of the baseball equipment and clothes for all of those kids. And you guys are familiar with Path Projects. Path reached out to me and said, do you know runners that were displaced? And one of my training partners lived in the Palisades. So Path sent me some running clothes for one of the dads of the kids that I coach and one of my running buddies. So you don't see this level of compassion and love and support unless you're adjacent to a tragedy. And that's the sad part of this, is that, we kind of go through life in this sort of status quo, like we're going to live forever. And we get lost in the day to day of, making money, providing for our family, and the minutia of, like, I got to get my workout in and I got to train for this race. And sometimes you lose the importance of those relationships, and the positive silver lining that comes out of this is the connectivity of human beings, and reaching out to help the people that are suffering.
It makes me think back, Jimmy, thanks for that, to the book by Sebastian Junger, Tribe, when he talks about chaos and catastrophe, and all of a sudden, all the cliques and the groups that gather together and make their own island, everybody comes together and works hard, and status of where you fit in that community is thrown away. It's just help one another. And it sounds like your community right now is doing that across the board.
Yeah, people that have either run with the Coyotes in the past, 15 years, or have been at races with a lot of the Coyotes that we know on a first name basis. There were 4 or 5 runners in the Altadena area at the Eaton Canyon fire, which was equally devastating to those people that lost homes. And I've seen 4 or 5 GoFundMe's for the friends of mine that are runners that lost everything. And the tribal community of trail runners is a very deep, meaningful community. And I can think back over 20 years of racing, and I can't think of a race without thinking about some moment I had with a side-by-side stranger where they helped me get through something tough, or I helped them get through something tough. And it's why I'm still a part of the trail running community, even though my priorities have shifted. I'm in full scale, elbow deep dad mode with youth sports and baseball and soccer, and 73 birthday parties a weekend. And, all of those things have taken the amount of time I spend with the trail running community. It's taken the percentage of time that I'm on the trails and that I'm with trail runners down to, for the most part, 1 day a week. The Coyotes have hosted our Thursday morning Santa Monica Mountains trail run for 18 years. And we had a year off for the pandemic. And the amazing thing is, last Thursday was the first Thursday we've canceled due to fire. I'm sorry, it was only the second Thursday we've canceled due to fire or ash in 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And every trail that we do on Thursday burned. So it's going to be a while before they open those trails to let us back onto them. But another bit of the healing of all of this is realizing that, the mountain itself is going to be okay. The foliage and the trees and the flora will grow again. It'll take a long time, but it'll grow back. And there are certain trees in climates like ours that can survive fire, which is incredible. And so there's a renewal and a resilience that can begin to take place for the people that share these spaces, as those are safe enough to open again. And the trails themselves, the trails will be okay. But it's the burn scar, it's going to leave a mark for a long time. And the people that lost homes and communities they're never going to be the same. You hope that they get better, but if you've been through a massive trauma, you know that it becomes a part of who you are. And we're going to host a run this week, and we're going to meet up in a neighborhood coffee shop and do a little trail loop around the Brentwood Country Club, just as a communal experience and a way to be together and heal and share time together. And yeah, I've obviously diverted from this initial question, but the bottom line is there isn't another tribe in the athletic and the endurance world quite like the trail running community, the trail runner nation, the Coyotes. You know,
Yeah.
the people that go to ultra endurance events and, you know, pay money to suffer. They're a unique group of masochists, and there's a shared bond that transcends language, it transcends class, it transcends financial means, it transcends what clothes or equipment you're wearing, it transcends ability. So it's amazing to see those people respond to, you know, people all over the country are donating to these runners and families that have lost everything, and helping those people get back up off their feet. And it's just like, you know, you're at mile, you know, 73 of the Angeles Crest 100 or the Western States 100, and you see someone who's tripped and they're bleeding from both knees, and you know, you don't run by them and finish your race. You stop for a second and you pick them up, and you know, you put their arm over your shoulder and you walk with them up the next climb and make sure that they're okay and that they get through it. And it's heartbreaking and renewing all at the same time.
You know, it's these tragedies that bring out the best in us as in humanity, and in trail running, it's the tragedies, it's the pain caves, it's the accidents, the you know, trips on the trail, the bloody knees, that brings out the best in us as trail runners to stop and to help. And such a perfect introduction to what we want to talk about today. Just so you know, if you don't know anything about the SoCal Coyotes, it's a running group that Jimmy, did you start it? Or I know you're one of the leaders. Started back 15 years ago.
Yeah, the Coyotes has been through a number of evolutions. It's mine and Kate Martini Freeman's creation, and we had a Thursday morning trail running group, and it went through a few different evolutions. We were the Thursday Run Club, and then we had a little email that we called the Coyote Call. That was just sort of like getting people out to run with us. And then as I was coaching marathon programs for the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society back in the 2002 to 2005, 2008, I don't know. That window I was coaching marathon teams. And as I stepped away from coaching marathon teams, I had been leading this trail run every week. And one of the guys that ran trails with us said, you should do a training program. You have a community already built here. And we were just trying to figure out what to call it. And we took the email that we were sending out called the Coyote Call, and we decided to call ourselves the Coyotes. And the sort of symbolism with the Coyotes was that they are both a pack animal and an individual animal. They can survive by themselves, or they can survive in packs. And they feel very, it's a very adaptable creature, very survivalist creature. There are packs of coyotes, quite literally, in the community of Brentwood that live among the urban scrawl here. We were up against the VA, the Brentwood VA, the Veterans Administration grounds, and they hide out in various buildings and nature areas in the VA. And then the Brentwood Country Club, there's a back area near a water and power pumping station, and there's a den of coyotes there as well. And so walking down my street, which is very urban, Montana Avenue, at night, every once in a while, I'll be like, oh man, there's a dog off the leash over there. And I'll look up and I'm like, yes, that's a coyote. So
they roam wild.
Yeah. So I've always had a fascination with the animal, just in terms of its ability to be solo or communal. and they're good runners. You know, they can survive extreme events like wildfire and crazy terrain, and that became sort of our group identity, the SoCal Coyotes. And I would say we formally have been around since 2009. I think that was our first training program. But the group of people that was running the trails with us weekly dates all the way back to like 2004 or 5.
I had a nice opportunity to run Angeles Crest, which is right there in your backyard. And my experience with the Coyote Call was a little bit different. As I'm, coming into an aid station, all of a sudden I start hearing these whoops and hollers from behind me, from in front of me, from every direction. I couldn't tell, but that's my introduction to the SoCal Coyotes. Was the actual runners themselves do have a call that they communicate and call one another together and send strength and energy to other runners that are out there on the team.
Our Coyote Howl actually came out of Thursday runs and weekend runs. When we would have a new runner come with us, we didn't want to mark the path. So when they would get to an intersection and they didn't know which way to go, we would tell people, howl like a coyote. And the person that's closest to you will howl back, and they would know which direction to go. So it was
brilliant.
It started off as a functional way to follow each other on the trail. And then we started just howling to be idiots and yell back and forth to each other like lunatics.
Yeah, a lot of fun. I tell you, we've missed you, Jimmy. It's nice that your family's safe, your friends are safe, and that the Coyotes out there are safe. And we hope and pray that it continues to improve out there, because you're not through it yet. But there's a lot of effort that's going in that direction. So power to them and to the people that are helping one another.
Yeah, the last count, there's 5,100 plus fire personnel on our fire. And we have 2 more days of high wind, red flag warnings. But the feeling while on edge is optimistic. Like we believe that we've seen the worst of it, and I have a lot of faith in the fire command and these helicopter pilots and the planes that were doing the drops. It's been really remarkable to watch them try to keep home safe and neighborhoods safe.
Well, maybe at the conclusion of this podcast, as we get rolling here, you'll do a coyote yell for us out to all the runners that are out there. Ryan, if you can remind us to have Jimmy give us that call to bring the communities together, that would be great. Scott, let's kick this thing off.
Well, one of the things that the Coyotes have developed, and you may be living in Norway or Argentina or Germany and thinking, boy, the Coyote seems like a really cool group. Well, it's a microcosm of trail running as a whole. And we've seen that as we talk to many people around the world. And one of the things that we wanted to revisit is something that Jimmy came up with called the Coyote Bushido. We're going to find out what Bushido means and where that name came from. But originally published, I think, a video back in 2012. We'll link that to this, the show notes. And we did a podcast. I think we did 2 podcasts, but the last one we did was in 2020 to kind of review the Bushido and see if it was still relevant. And Don and I were running the other day last week, and we thought, I wonder if the Bushido is even relevant today in 2024. And what it is, it's a unwritten code on how we run, race, and even how we might live our lives. Now, why are we reviewing this? Because some of us veterans need reminded, what are these characteristics, or what are these items? And if you're new to trail running, it's good to know what you need to be or how you need to act as a new member of this tribe. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
So who's going to define it? I would say Jimmy probably should be the person that helps.
I want. So Bushido is a Japanese word. Why did you call it the Bushido?
So among the many different things I've studied in my life, I always had a fascination with samurai culture, and Japanese culture as a whole is largely grounded in this old world samurai code of ethics and the sort of way of living. The samurai called it the Bushido, and it was basically like their code of honor. And I have a book based on the Bushido that I'm in all of the chaos of being ready to evacuate. I'm not quite sure where it is. But the book just outlined principles and how you live your life and how you treat people and how you deal with adversity and how you sort of have this hierarchy of behaviors. And I had kind of this Jerry Maguire wake up in the middle of the night in a sweat moment where I was like, there's a version of this that exists for runners. This is kind of like an unwritten code. And at the time, I started to scribble down, like, what is the Bushido of trail running? What is our code of ethics? And I wrote out initially 10 points and ended up being 11. And I committed it to paper. And then I thought to myself, like, this can be sort of the guidelines for our running club, but it's bigger than us. And
Right.
It wasn't about, I didn't find it to be like a matter of creation. I found it to be a matter of discovery. Like, having been in this community for a long time and interacting with people that were people that I wanted to emulate, that were the old guard of trail running, the Scotty Mills down in San Diego and Gordy Ainsley and all of the people that came before us. They had a way of being that was admirable and inspiring. And so I went through all of these points and I really did lean on the samurai code of ethics because I thought it was such a cool and interesting society. And so we wrote it as just sort of like a map of when we bring new runners into our running club, into our community, into our tribe, sort of the standards and behaviors that we want to emulate. And again, like, I always hesitated to call them rules, more just sort of like guidelines of this is how we aspire to be. No one in our club is saying that this is us. This is our, this is our goal. This is what we're, aiming for. And we filmed a video and posted it, and it was all core members of our group that emulated each one of these characteristics, and put it up there, and it's been in the YouTube and the interwebs for more than a decade. And it's funny because I've had trail runners from all over the world reach out to me and talk about how it resonated with them and how they wanted to emulate that in their community and on their trails. And so it keeps coming up over and over and over again, and it's really cool. And I've traveled to Japan a couple of times. I've run races in Japan, and I've made friends with Japanese runners that I've competed with and against and side by side at Badwater and a race in China, and this is something I've always leaned on, and being a kind of douchey white guy, I've also got some kanji tattooed on my arm, which has always been like my reminder of sort of the qualities that I want to emulate.
Jimmy, as you've raced and traveled around the world, do you find that this is, even though you put pen to paper and wrote these aspirations down, do you find that it's kind of innate in trail runners, regardless of whether they've read this Bushido? in other
I mean,
countries?
I find that the core of every trail running and ultra distance community has pervasive amounts of this, and I've been in I've marinated in other tribes and other communities. I've run road races, I've run track races, I've been to obstacle course races, I've been a baseball player and a softball player, and so I've seen all of these different pockets and pods of different tribal behaviors, if you will. I know people that were deep in the skateboarding community and people that play tennis, and every tribe has its own sort of behavior and conduct and ethics. And it's almost like learning a new language. And you find that not everyone in a tribe adheres to those guidelines, but the pervasive foundation of it. You go to Cascade Crest in Washington, and the people at the aid stations are treating you in a very similar manner to the people in Virginia when you're running Old Dominion, or Vermont, Western states. Like there are some major through lines. And coming back to this Bushido, I don't feel a sense of authorship. I feel a sense of like stewardship. I feel a sense of like, this is something that I'm reading in the community and then trying to translate for people that aren't a member of this community, people that are new to it, to give them sort of access to shorten the learning curve. I was behaving like a total ungrateful douchebag for the first 5 or 6 years of being a part of this community. And it took doing it the wrong way to learn what the right way was. And as I stopped throwing tantrums at aid stations because they didn't have Coca-Cola, and like yelling at race directors because I took a wrong turn on a not marked intersection. As I started to learn what the right way to do these things was, then I could emulate those behaviors and, again, be a steward for people who are newer to the sport, coming from different tribes with different patterns of behavior.
I'm looking forward to hearing about each one of these things, Scott, but I think maybe Jimmy is set to do record for the longest point of the podcast without an official introduction of who he is. And you've asked me to do that, and I said, oh yeah, I'll be happy to do it. And now I'm failing.
We're halfway through. It's time to introduce Jimmy.
So let's do it. Hey, you may recognize that we have similar last names. We're both Freemans. And so you're thinking, are these two brothers? I mean, what's going on? Well, we don't have the same mother, but we are brothers, and we're brothers on the trail. And that's really what the Bushido is. We are truly all brothers and sisters out there, and we're a loving, committed community. Since 2002, he has coached this is Jimmy Dean we're talking about, more than 2,000 adults and young people to run further and breaking through self-imposed glass ceilings. And he's been running competitively for more than 4 decades. Jimmy, well, I'm going to do a fact check. 4 decades. And this came off your website. You're only 32. How is it that you run 4 decades? So he's pushing during those 4 days. Oh, you don't have to answer that. We'll just assume that there was, we'll decide later in the podcast whether it's a fact or fiction there. Over 200 races he's run, including the Boston Marathon, Angeles Crest 100, Western States 100, Badwater 135, the original 600 challenge in 2014, a race through June through September. Now, it's not a multi-month race, but you ran each one of these: Old Dominion, Western States, Vermont Trail, Angeles Crest, Leadville Trail, and Wasatch Front, all through those months of June through September. Jimmy, it's so nice to have you back on this podcast and talk about the Bushido. My first question to you, before we get into each one, is, do you think the trail community is held to these standards? Do you think we're drifting away from it? Do you think we're getting closer to it? You're out there on the trails. What do you see?
Every community, every individual, every organism evolves. And so you can write down, there's Miss Kate. You can write down anything you want, guidelines or standards, and the very next day it's partially obsolete. Like that, as the community grows and brings new members into it, some people will fall in the flow of how the community is, and some people will challenge the standards. And that's healthy. You know, I've always thought that, like, I want people in my life that are challenging, opinionated people, because they either will solidify my opinion on something or they will send me in a direction that is more true. And the bigger the community gets, the more the dynamic changes. And this has been a community that's been in rapid growth since I joined it in the early 2000s. You know, I signed up for Western States when you couldn't lose 3 years in a row. And, you know, now what is it? 10,000 people applying for the race every year, 5,000. I don't even know what the number is anymore, but the community's grown incredibly. And, you know, largely in part to, you know, you guys were a foundational podcast, you know, with the beginning of Ultra Runner podcast that evolved into Trail Runner Nation. You guys were one of the first, if not the first, podcast out there talking about ultra running and trail running. And social media, you know, Instagram, TikTok, all those things were amplifiers for how beautiful a race was or how much people enjoyed a certain experience, and more people wanted to have those experiences as they learned about them. So, yeah, I've been to enough races recently that a lot of these tenets are still foundational cornerstones, and there's elements of it that are very, very different. You know, the hype and the fanfare of the Western States and the Mont Blanc races, you know, that level of newsworthiness didn't exist 20 years ago. You know, Badwater was televised on a thing on ESPN. You know, it's like, so there's a lot that's going to evolve and a lot that's going to change. I still feel these 11 points are cornerstones. They're not lived and breathed by every member of the community, but I would say that more people that are a part of this tribe embody these things than not.
Well, let's lean in and let's start. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah. One of the things, by having these aspirations and knowing them, kind of bringing us together as a tribe. And so what we want to do is go through these one by one, all 11, and get your opinion on first of all, defining what it is, and then we'll talk and see if they're still relevant today. So the first one is, which is numbered 0 through 10, so there's 11 points, is your physical health is ground zero. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we could read these or paraphrase what's in the video, but I think it'll be easier to just put the video in the show notes.
Yeah.
But basically, if you don't have your physical health, you can't enjoy the trails and the races and the training in the way that you can when you're strong and when you're healthy. And the whole point of getting into an activity like this is to enhance our health, enhance our well-being, enhance our vitality, enhance our endurance. And for some athletes, myself included, sometimes you get a big goal and you chase after it so hard that you redline and you put your long-term health at risk for short-term gains. And so that ground zero point was something that was an epiphany for me, to say that, like, we shouldn't be trading health for performance. We shouldn't be trading health for this race goal. That if we take care of our health first and we make this about enhancing health, the performance will come. Maybe not as fast as we want it to, but it'll be a more sustainable practice.
Boy,
And
that's
sometimes
a good one.
And sometimes that means backing off, just like on a long run or a race. When you start having issues, usually the first solution is to back off, to slow down. And I think that we need to give ourselves permission to do that. If you're training for something and your training plan says, I need to go out for a 13-mile run today, and in the first mile or two you start feeling a niggle, it's okay to turn back and give yourself permission, like you said, to take care of the overall well-being. So I love that one.
And not sacrificing sleep, trying to put it all in. And sometimes, we're stronger for sleeping in than going out. And other times we need to kick ourselves in the behind and get out there and do it because that's what's needed. So I don't want to sound like we're just telling people to stay in bed and sleep because that's the best solution. But sometimes you've got to motivate yourself and do something hard, especially when you're training to do something hard. You got to do some hard.
You've already highlighted, Don, one of the ways that this has evolved for me.
Oh, tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, I've always been a student of our physiology and our psychology and the balance between the two. And there's a difference between quantity of sleep and quality of sleep. That there are people that get 8 hours that aren't recovering as well as some people who get 5. And that when they do these health studies and they look at all the different variables from diet, sleep, exercise, supplementation, types of exercise, when they look at all these things, the single most important thing is exercise, even more so than sleep.
Right.
And so I think some people get stuck in this failure to launch phase of like, well, I'm not rested enough, so I can't challenge my body. Whereas when we're exercising in the right way, it actually unlocks energy. It doesn't take things away from you. It gives you things. And so, yeah, I'm not the sleep in guy. I'm definitely tracking my sleep every night with all of our cool new tools and technology. and I'm looking at the quality of my sleep and then also prioritizing the exercise.
Huh. That's really observant because I know when I'm exercising regularly, I sleep better.
Mm-hmm.
And my body rebuilds better than just saying, oh, sleep. I should just sleep more.
Yeah,
so good point.
You radically alter your internal metabolic state and the way that your body deals with energy and recovers. So, yeah, you can sleep better in 5-6 hours when you're exercising than you can 8 hours when you're not.
Or if you're running a 200 miler like Don's done before, a 10-minute trail nap is pretty effective, right,
Yep.
Don?
There's some. It's not really a choice. You just can't go anymore unless you lay down. All right, what's number 1? Since we got number 0,
Go ahead, Don.
Oh, I don't have them in front of me, Scott. I'd have to
look on your phone. Number 1. Look on your phone. Number 1. So we did number 1, which was 0. The next one is respect the run. Running is truly a gift. Talk to us about this, Jimmy.
Yeah. So I'm going to tie a through line here to 1, 2, and 3, because they all start with the word respect. And this was very much part of the Bushido code. The samurai code was based in respect. So respect the run. And then the second one that we'll get to in a second is respect the athlete. And the third one is respect the trails. In respecting the run, not everybody can run.
Right.
And if you're an able-bodied human being, if you have, 2 arms and 2 legs and all your digits and a functioning normal body, I think sometimes we get lost in it doesn't feel good today, or I'm not inspired, or I don't feel like it. And we lose sight of the fact that the reframe there is, what if you didn't have a right leg? Or what if you didn't have a left foot? Or what if, and obviously, people can run with prosthetics and artificial feet and whatnot. But if you have a body that functions, even a bad day is a good day. Even a hard workout, a workout that doesn't feel good, is a gift. And I actually hurt my foot a couple days ago, last week, with all of the high winds. It's blowing trees down. It's blowing branches out of trees. And I tripped on a palm fronds, a very, very big, palm tree branch. And they have these crazy spikes. And I wish I could say I was doing something noble, like, helping a baby out of a car, or, helping put out a fire. But, I was getting out of my car and I tripped over one of these these branches, and the spike actually pierced my shoe sock and the top of my foot. And I haven't been able to run for a few days. And there's not a lot of days that I'm too hurt to run. And I'm desperate to get out there for a run. And I think I'm a day or two away. Had to go to the doctor yesterday. They actually had to perform a minor procedure to drain my foot. And it was infected, and I had to get antibiotics and a tetanus shot and all this stuff. But like I am very present to number one right now. Respect the run. You can't, there'll be times in our life that we can't do it, where an injury prevents it, or, in the middle of this crazy apocalypse that we're in down here in LA, running hasn't been available to us because of the air quality, because of the evacuation status. So appreciating this very simple ability that you can get out the door and go for a run. You really appreciate it when it's not there.
There are two types of discipline: the discipline to get up and get out there and do it, and the other discipline is to make sure you're healed up before you go back out, to hold yourself back when you really want to go, pushing yourself too early and re-injuring yourself because of it, or delaying your recovery because of your anxious, desire to get out there and play in the hills. So two different types of discipline. I know that's not a Bushido, but just a comment from the guy that doesn't have the list on his phone and wants to fill in some space here. I can't find it, Scott. I'm looking.
Look in the text to you and Jimmy.
Oh, that's where it is. Okay. Who would have thought?
You can also you can also Google it. It's on the web.
Hey, you don't need to pile on, Jimmy.
Hey, I want to recall. Don and I recently had a conversation where we recorded an episode with Iron Cowboy, and he's run many triathlons, and one of the records that he set a few years ago was 30 marathons in 30 days. And triathlon, full distance triathlon. And on the 27th of the 30th, he actually was joined by a kid who had cerebral palsy that loves being towed around and, in a raft, being pulled in a raft. And he said, of all, and this is after he's run the 30, he ran 50 in 50 states in 50 days. And then he ran 100 consecutive marathons, day after day after day, not marathons, triathlons. He said it was probably one of the most memorable experiences he has ever had competing, was that one time when he was assisting another person who couldn't swim, run, or bike. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really good point, that it's good for our soul as well to respect the run.
For sure.
I have number 4 here. I have the list sitting right in. It was on my phone the whole time, Scott, in that hidden text between you and Jimmy and myself. And number 4.
Well, should we get before we get to 4?
Number 2, Don.
Oh,
we need we need to go. Respect the athlete is the next one, Don.
Oh, so Ryan, I really hope that you kind of clean this up a little bit, and we'll know if you did. We'll know if you did. So number 2.
Respect the athlete.
Respect the athlete.
Yeah. So this one is a matter of that our club has seen a lot of different people from a fitness background, from high level ability to total beginners, and so many different body types. And to me, it doesn't matter if your easy run day is 5 minutes 30 seconds per mile pace, or your all out anaerobic threshold training pace is 17-minute miles. Like, if you lace up the shoes, if you get out the door, if you're on your bike, if you're swimming, whatever you do, you had to have the discipline to start. You had to put on your shoes and get out the door. And I don't care if you run 100 feet or 100 miles. Any day you do that, you're an athlete, and you command my respect. And it doesn't matter, as I said, ability or fitness or experience. You can be on your first run or your 10,000th run. I tip my cap to you.
You know, I think it's kind of historical apocrypha now, but I think it's true. Where Scott Jurek in his heyday at Western States, you know, being the fastest runner for multiple years, and I don't know how many cougars he brought home. It was 7. Thank you. Both the Freemans knew it was 7, but it was common to see him after he finished to be in a sleeping bag on the track of the finish line and cheering every runner, even the last runner, through the finish line. He didn't go back to the hotel and take a shower and sleep it off. He was there because he respected everyone that started that race that day. And I can't say enough about that example that I have in my life of Scott Jurek showing respect for the athlete.
And he would do the standing at the finish line cheering for every athlete for almost as long as he would run it.
Yes.
Right.
He was running in like 16 to 18 hours and then spending, 12 to 14 hours at the finish line, which is pretty incredible.
Yes. And he's not the only one. There are a number of great examples of that, but Scott Jurek, to me, stands out, Scott.
Yeah.
This is probably the first time I've appreciated that type of, commitment to the community and to the group of runners in that race.
Scott's nickname is Jerker, and Jerker was a perfect embodiment of number 2.
Yeah.
Who's Jerker? Help us out for those who don't know.
Scott Jurek. His nickname is Jerker.
Oh! I thought you meant it was a nickname. Got it.
We'll whiteboard it for you later, Scott.
All right. The last respect is respect the trails, and this is apropos right now, right?
Yeah, this one hurts. So wherever you live in the world, whether you're trail adjacent or your trail is a dirt path around a golf course, or a reconditioned railroad track is now your path. We always should respect the place that can make us better. And, there are very literal things you can do, like picking up trash around your local running route. And then there's more, dramatic things you can do, like trail maintenance work and conservancy and raising money and lots of different things you can do to help give back to what is giving you so much. And, for me, I'm not a religious individual. It almost feels cliche to say this in LA. I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. But the trails, I always saw church in any denomination of religious belief as a place people go to make themselves better, as a place they go for community and enhancing the way in which we live life. So I always saw the mountain and the trails as my church, because that's where I go to bring a better version of myself back. It's where I do my most reflective thinking. It's where I get out my angst and my stress and anxieties and come back, with endorphins and adrenaline and serotonin, and where I'm able to give my kids a better version of myself and my wife a better version of myself. So the trails for me are church. And in that space, respecting where we step, any space we step into to make ourselves better, we should also have a goal to make that space better.
Respecting the trail reminds me of the story when you were on one of your many times, Jimmy, when Scott tells the story. Now he knows where I'm going because, we've run a lot of hours together. I can't really say miles anymore. We've run a lot of hours together. And so we share stories back and forth, and I know every one of his and he knows every one of mine. This one has been repeated a number of times about the conversation we had with you. And Scott said, I put my gloves on a tree and I know I'm going to come back to it. And I came back and my gloves were gone. And Scott, he was adamant about this is not proper trail etiquette. And which, he has a point, but then you came in to remind him that, Scott, What do you think this is? A lost and found? Do you think it's your personal closet? That tree isn't a place for your gloves. I just love that. I like reminding him of that story because it allows.
He does often.
I do. I like it. Yeah. So you're on the trail with us many times as you really put him in his place.
I don't know if you guys put your own shows into your own show notes, but the trail running etiquette episode that we did, I don't know, what was that, 2012, 2013?
It was early. Yep.
Yeah, that episode still stands. It still has legs. And when I have new running clients and people that are training for trail races that are new to the trail community, I actually require that they listen to that episode. So, so Ryan,
maybe we need to re-record that one again.
Let's take a look at that.
Trail etiquette could definitely use an update and a refresher.
You know, I just want to point out a couple people that embody this, and Don knows absolutely. Matt Lambert, who grew up in Auburn, and we see him out on the trails a lot. He's not a racer, but he's definitely a trail runner. And every time we see him, we saw him just the other day, and he had 2 plastic bottles in his hands. And the unknowing person that would come across Matt would say, "Oh, those are his water bottles." They're not. Don says, "Those water bottles you're carrying, you picked up because you saw them. They were trash, weren't they?" And he kind of looks and he goes, "Yeah." And that's just who he is. He'll stop and he'll pick up trash. The other one that I want to make mention of is Elke Reamer, who is an amazing steward of our trails. She respects them so much. There was not too long ago a huge 2 or 3 trees that came down across the main trail that we run, and it was only down for like 2 days. The next time I went out to run that trail, they were cut, and these are big trees. They're probably 30-inch diameter trees, and she got out there with her mini chainsaws and her crew and took care of it. And the unknowing trail runner would just say, "Oh, that's the government," or, you know, the rangers came out and did that. No, it's not. It's people like you and me that are going out there. They respect the trails and they want to protect and make these trails available. So they do the work, and it's never with fanfare. So I love that one. Let's see. We gotta pick up the pace here. I think we're on 4 finally. Freeman.
Oh, that's mine. And I put my phone down. So just, Ryan, this is another spot where you can kind of shorten it up so I don't look so bad. That would be great. And I think the listeners will realize if you actually did that, which I appreciate.
Respect the podcast host.
That is not 4, but it could be. So number 4, the one I've been waiting for, the one that is really protected by all the ones above it and below it, because it's that important. It wasn't hung out of the end where it's vulnerable. This is right in the middle, kind of like our heart. Our heart's the center of our body and protected from the rest of us. And you
Have you found it yet, Freeman?
I did. I was stalling for myself because you guys wouldn't help me. I knew you wouldn't, so I had to do it. Number 4, remember where you started. Remember where you started. And if it's an out and back, that's very important because that's where your car is.
Yeah, remember where you started it doesn't matter if you've been running for a month or a decade or 3 decades, that we sometimes lose touch with how much ground we've taken. And, like my fall out of bed pace might be 9-minute miles, but when I started, I couldn't run a mile. And,
right.
If you can reframe that, like, reminder that you've already done a lot of work to get to where you are, and that whether today is a struggle or you're not hitting the goals or the marks that you have, if you can reframe to remember and be grateful for that you've already taken a ton of ground, and that for a lot of us, running has become part of our lifestyle. It's not just a training plan. It's a every week, every day sort of exploration of health. Remember where you started will give you an attitude of gratefulness and appreciation, and it'll represence you to the moment of that. It doesn't matter if you're not running your fastest ever right now.
I think it for me, it refers to identity also. And that's one thing that I've struggled with for years is imposter syndrome. That, even though I've run some long races and done some long training runs, sometimes I don't fit into the stereotypical runner persona. And sometimes I feel like an imposter, and I need to come to grips with, no, I am a runner. That is part of who I am. And it's taken me a decade or longer to come to that. So I think that that's important, is to remember where you came from.
Scott, the next one, number 5, actually touches on that, and 4 and 5 kind of go together in that way.
Go ahead. Let us.
Number 5 is thou shalt not envy another runner. And this one addresses the very baseline human trait of comparative analysis. The way our brains work, if you have an experience a second time, you compare it to the first time. If you go to a restaurant and you have a better or worse experience, you're still comparing it to the first time you went to the restaurant. And we also do that with people. And imposter syndrome largely comes with comparing ourselves to other people, for us, that are symbolic of the thing that we're striving to be. Like, I want to be a great runner. I want to be known as a great runner, but I'm not as great as Ann Trayson. I'm not as great as Scott Mills. And then it's a reflective invalidation of who we are. And it discredits all of the work that we do to be what we want to be. And dude, you're as runner as they come. I've been side by side with you at the end of a race and watched you grind and struggle. And like, I've seen you at the end of Western States. I've seen you at the end of, I don't know, it was a Rio del Lago or the double marathon that used to be a part of it, Sierra Nevada endurance run. But yeah, I mean, you embody everything to me that a runner is, and a trail runner and an endurance athlete. And so the thou shalt not envy another runner is that reminder that we can fall in that trap of comparing ourselves to other people. And whenever we're comparing anything, we always put ourselves lower. If I want to compare how much money I make, I live in Brentwood. Like, it feels like everyone in Brentwood makes more money than me. And if I want to compare myself as an athlete, and I look at every race I've ever been in, there's always people in front of me. And it's just, it's an exhausting hamster wheel of reducing ourselves to less. So thou shalt not envy another runner is remembering that your success is uniquely yours. You have to earn everything. Every step that you take, you had to take on your own. And that to take pride in the work that you've done and to not look at other people and make yourself less.
Before we move to number 6, I want to put this comment out there: is you never know what's going on inside that other person. And with that comment, I'm going to bring another Jimmy Dean example. You'll never see a person happier and more carefree than Jimmy Dean coming into an aid station. Now, he may have been crawling up the climb to get to the aid station and grabbing to roots and rocks to try to get up and convincing himself that he needs to continue. But coming through that aid station, he's high-fiving, he's arms in the air. You think he's just finished a 1,000-mile run and he was the victor. He comes through just bringing energy. And if you're comparing yourself to that guy, you're never going to feel as good as that guy because he's coming in hot.
All right. So, Don, we touch on this very thing in number 6 and number 8. So put a pin in that. We'll come back to it.
All right, good.
I do want to say that I'm going to make a little subcategory to number 5, thou shalt not envy another runner. I think that a lot of people, and I've talked to some race directors like Julie Fingar, that she gets frustrated sometimes that she has runners come to her and say that they don't feel like they are an ultra runner until they've run 100 miles. And you don't need to run 100 miles. You don't need to run 50 miles. So I think that's also good that you know, it's good to push yourself. Absolutely. You need to push yourself and find out who you are and do hard things, but don't compare yourself to think that I can't say that I am this until I've done this. So I think that's an important part. Number 6, Jimmy, lead us into number 6.
Number 6 is lead by example. And lead by example is a commitment to having an impact in the lives of others. And this transcends trail running and trail racing, but it is while you're out there in the trails, whether someone's hiking or, you know, running, or you're in a race, or you're just on a training run, everyone out there is a fellow participant, and you never know what somebody needs, you know, physical needs or emotional needs. You know, I've made it a practice of, when I pass someone in the latter stages of a trail race, to just say hi and check in. And there are times that that's impossible. There are occasionally trail runners that wear 2 earbuds and are blasting their music, trying to disassociate from where they are at the moment. But for the most part, you're able to engage with people, and even if it's not like, hey, I'm cramping and I'm out of salt pills, or I've run out of water, and you can share water with them. Like, even in the non-obvious scenarios, sometimes sharing a moment of a chat or a conversation can take someone's mind off of the suffering that they're going through. And so that the lead by example is just to, you know, engage yourself in what's happening around you, and the other people that are participating alongside you, and how can you impact that in a positive way. And when you embody that, even if you are yourself suffering, you take yourself out of that for a moment, and you get that good energy from that transaction. You know, I hate to say the word transaction, but the engagement with the other person, you know, you lift them up, and that lifts you up.
So that leads me to another Jimmy Dean Freeman story, if I may. I didn't realize I had so many Jimmy Dean stories in me, but you'll remember this one, Jimmy. And it was from that Angeles Crest run, and we were both runners at the time. And I happened to be running side by side with you. Now, you're a stronger, better runner, but I was with you, and I was impressed that I was actually up that far. And I'm thinking, things are going good. This is a day of days. I mean, this is the one that's going to go down in history. And boy, let me tell you, it did, because it did not end the way it was happening at that moment. And we were running along, and I'm thinking, this might be the fastest race I have ever run. And we come across the guy that was cramping or some blister, and Jimmy stops. And I'm thinking, Jimmy, we can't stop. I mean, do you realize where we are in this race and what could happen, and what this story is, what that I could tell, because this is going to be my best one ever. And we stopped, and I stopped with him because he's a good leader, and it was the right thing to do. And we helped the person, got him back up, and moved him down, saved his race. And actually, it didn't affect mine at all, because mine was saved by those same runners later on when I was leaning against a tree and just dire straits. Jimmy taught me that the runners are more important than your actual time or race, and take care of people, because when you're down, you need help. And their tough spot can never measure up to whatever you try to succeed at and finish off. I would have felt terrible had we not stopped, and then been leaning against a tree later and have that same runner that I ran by run by me. I think it just would have been terrible. Jimmy set such a good example as others first, you second. And I carried that with me always after that experience. So thank you for that, Jimmy.
It doesn't always happen that way. So I was at Cascade Crest, and I sat down on a trail, and we happened to be running Cascade Crest that year in the middle of a wildfire. And the second half of the trail was closed. So we were doing a 50-mile out and back. And the Cascade Crest does almost half of the races on the PCT. And it's at the time of year that people hiking from Mexico to Canada are coming through that area. So I was really struggling. I had forgotten to eat or drink for like an hour, and I sat down on a rock and was just kind of regrouping, and a PCT thru hiker stopped and started talking to me. And another guy in the race goes running by, and he sees me sitting down, kind of disheveled and like probably looking pretty worn out. And he goes, "Are you in the race?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Huh, maybe 100 miling isn't for you."
Ooh, ouch.
So I got up, and we were probably 40 miles into the race.
That probably motivated you more to get up and go, right?
Yeah, it did. It did. I got to the mile 50 turnaround and picked up a pacer, and the pacer was a local to that race named Aether. And I told him the story of this guy that sort of taunted me as he went by. And now, I'm very mentally tough, especially in my later racing years. I was always able to sort of reframe my suffering. And I told him I saw this guy in the out and back as we were going through this 2-mile long tunnel to get to the mile 50 checkpoint. I saw him running back the other way. And I said, "I don't have a lot of goals in this race anymore, but catching that guy is one of them."
Yeah.
So Aether and I talked about this for the better part of 15 miles about what I would say to him as I was passing him. And we came up with about 19 colorful reverse taunts. And lo and behold, in the middle of the night, I come up to this guy sitting on a rock, totally crushed. And I did not have it in me to deliver one of these very cleverly thought out taunts that we had discussed for many hours. And maybe discussing them for many hours worked out that angst. But I asked him if he was okay, and I offered him some electrolyte pills and some gels, and he recognized me and sort of like nodded. And so we go on in the race, and I finished the race, and Aether knew who he was because he was also local to that community. And as I got to the finish line, and it actually finishes at a fire station, and I was sitting, regrouping, and I heard the announcer say, "And now," da, 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 da. And I went running outside to high five him in the final line, and he sort of smirked and like said something to the effect of like, "I got what I deserved there," and we were both like, it was a friendly high five in exchange at the finish line that maybe reframed the way that he interacted with runners after that. So
that might have been
it goes back and forth.
Exactly what he needed, and
Respect
you were the vehicle.
the runner.
Yeah. Well, good. What number are we on?
Number 7, the all-in mentality.
You gotta love that one. All-in mentality. What were you thinking at that point when you wrote that one down, Jimmy?
Well, part of it is my wife has a tattoo that says "all in." And it's this idea that a lot of times we're not fully invested or fully committed to what we're doing in life, just in general. We're kind of half-mast on a lot of activities and a lot of things because we're so distracted in different areas. But the all-in mentality is just sort of appreciating the moment right now. I'm able to get out for this hour, this day, this trail, and appreciating that you don't know what the next moment or the next day is going to look like. And so investing yourself fully in what you're doing in this moment on your run, because it's just, you don't want to be in this mindless grind and not appreciating what you're able to do, investing yourself, focusing on what you're doing, and appreciating the moment.
Good one. The next one's have fun at all costs. And I think this is probably, excuse me. I think this is, for me, probably the easiest of the 11 because I have great friends that I run with that make it fun. And, so anyway, I would say this one's the easiest one for me, Jimmy. Tell us a little bit more about having fun at all costs.
Well, this comes back to Don's misguided speculation that I'm hooting and hollering when I come into every aid station. I think a subtext to this one for me is fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
So the have fun at all costs is this idea where if you're able to not take yourself too seriously and you're able to bring some youth playfulness to very serious situations or feeling awful, you're still able to like joke around, goof off, that it will not only elevate your experience, but it gives that positive vibration to the people around you, and then they give that back to you. So if you've ever been really suffering, just as a very direct example, climbing up to Michigan Bluff is miserable. And you get to the Michigan Bluff aid station, and if you've raced Western states and crewed Western states, you know that Michigan Bluff is a very different experience for the athlete than it is for the crew and the spectators and the participants. And I invite everyone here, if you're at a 100-mile aid station late in a race, watch the different athletes come through and how they interact with the volunteers.
Yes.
If the person is suffering and complaining and grinding, the way in which they are handled is very distinct. People will give them sympathy. People will coddle them. People will do their best to uplift them. Whereas if someone comes in hooting and hollering and like having fun, like it boosts everyone that's at that aid station table. It boosts the spectators. The spectators cheer a little louder. You know, the person that's like grinding with their head down and like limping, people are like, you can do it. It's okay. Yeah, you've got this. Whereas like people that are like waving their hands around and yelling and high-fiving, like everybody gets energized by it. And when everyone around you is energized, that energy is cyclical. It comes back to you. It gets you pumped up. So one of my strategies was the worse I feel, the more I have to pretend or like give myself like this false like performance style like of engagement when I get into a checkpoint, because I don't want to be coddled. That energy doesn't boost me. I don't want sympathy. I don't want pity. I put myself in this on purpose. And so by hooting and hollering and howling and high-fiving and all that, then that would get everyone around me fired up. And that energy would carry me for at least another 10 steps out of the aid station. And sometimes longer, you know, like I could turn a race around by interacting with aid station volunteers and spectators and crew in a positive manner. Even if it was, as I said, faking it or performative, like it would give me energy and sometimes completely flip my experience in a race.
It makes me think of the time, and it was that we spoke with David Horton, and he talked about everything below the neck has a different perspective of the race than above the neck. You know, your body can continue. It can go longer than you even know. It's the brain, the mind that gets in the middle that tells you to stop, to slow down, to focus on this pain. This is really terrible. You shouldn't continue. You could die doing this. All of these things are self-sabotage, but below the neck is just a machine, and it's willing to go, go, go. Some of the physiology may be off. You may need a little bit of electrolyte, some fuel, maybe just something needs to change a bit, but we have incredible capacity and abilities below the neck. It's so often above the neck that shut us down.
Yeah, the quote that always resonated for me around that principle is pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. That you're going to feel physical discomfort challenging a mountain, but your physical discomfort doesn't have to be your emotional and psychological experience. That like sometimes we don't realize we're suffering. And suffering from the Buddhist perspective, I'm not Buddhist, but I studied a lot of the different religions and mindsets. The idea of suffering is it's where your expectation and your experience don't match. I expect to be here, but I'm here, so I'm suffering about the gap. And if you can give up expectations, then you can just be present in the moment, experiencing what you're experiencing, and suddenly you're not upset or frustrated that you're in physical pain. And in the middle of these races, you're gonna be in pain. And, you know, separate conversation, there's 4 types of pain. You're gonna experience at least 3 of the 4 types of pain in a long trail race. So if you can embrace that, that's part of the experience, suddenly you're not upset or frustrated or suffering that you're in pain.
Oh boy, that's a philosophical class you need to write there, Jimmy. This next one probably needs the most explanation. Number 9 is Pedroing it. Notes on finishing strong.
Pedro Martinez, of no relation to the Hall of Fame caliber Major League pitcher. Pedro is a longtime Coyote and still runs with us to this very day. He's been part of our group for as long as it's been around. Pedro had this mentality in every race that he did, from the marathon to the 100-miler, where he was going to treat the last 5K of the race like a standalone 5K. And it didn't matter how broken he was, how much he had thrown up. He was going to run all out at the finish. And it wasn't about who he was around. It wasn't about, you know, being a higher place in the race. It was about the last thing I'm going to remember is how I finished, how I crossed the line. And we sort of talked to Pedro about his mentality and adopted it as a club. And the whole idea of it was, you want to go hard in the last, 5 to 10% of the race, and you want to manage yourself so you have that extra gear to push hard. And what's interesting is it's largely a psychological construct, because everybody who's raced a very long trail race, from the marathon to the 100-miler, has been running as fast as they could run for the last couple of miles, cross the finish line, and not been able to take another step. And it's like, well, what happened there? Did I have exactly that many steps in me? Yeah. It's like, no, you in your mind had a goal. And once that goal was achieved, the context to your suffering changed. And suddenly, you couldn't walk anymore, so yeah. This was just another sort of addendum to that psychological construct of, okay, if you can run hard. If you can suffer, you can push. And so we all sort of decided that, like, we were going to treat the last 5 to 10% of a long race like that was the race by itself.
And,
so
and as I listen to that story, that last 5% may not be the fastest 5%, but you're running it with the intent and with the mental space that you're a strong runner, efficient runner, and you're not suffering runner. You're moving towards victory. So it's more of a psychological finish than maybe a timed finish. I say that without knowing Pedro or even knowing how you guys practice it, but that's what I hear over here in Northern California.
And if you want a good example, just direct message me and I'll send you a short video of my friend Don Freeman running around the track at the Bigfoot 200, because as he explains it, he felt like he was running the fastest quarter mile he's ever run in his life. He thought he was like 50 seconds, 40 seconds around the track, and he felt like he was running the fastest he'd ever run. And inside his head, he probably was. Inside his soul, he probably was. But then you can see the video.
Well, let me tell you, Scott, that I'm running around that track, not to get off on our runs, but I will tell you that during that run, I thought, Don, you should slow down, because right now it really looks like you're just showboating and showing people that how strong you are. You need to back off a little bit. And I thought, I'm going to throw caution to the wind. I'm going to sail around this thing at breakneck speed and impress the people. They'll probably think I have a twin brother and they stepped in and they're finishing this one lap. But as I reviewed the video Scott is offering up so kindly without my consent, it wasn't real fast. It didn't even look fast.
That happens to me every
that's
week when I play softball. I think I'm sprinting from home to first, and then I see one of my buddies videoed it, and I look at the video and go, "Good God, I look like I'm running a 100-mile race."
$6 million man in slow motion. Hey, there is a little caveat in the Pedroing. Could tell us a little bit about the exception to that rule?
Yeah, so finishing as fast as you can in the last 5% of the race or so, we found that it was counterintuitive to sort of the community and the tribe of ultra running. If you and another runner have fallen into step with each other and have run a large portion of the race together, that it didn't feel noble or authentic to drop the hammer when someone and you have run together for, like, let's say you've run the second half of a 100-mile race together. Like, it didn't feel right to drop that person in the last 3 miles just because you were going to Pedro it. So we sort of created this like check-in with people, like, okay, it's great to have that social contract with someone where you get them through their low moments and they get you through your low moments. But if you're planning to run for time, or you're planning to Pedro it, so to speak, that you leave them before you get into that last like 10 miles of the race, because it just doesn't feel right when you're working together for so long and then you just take off like you were racing them the whole time. So that was sort of the subtext to that Pedroing it, is like, if you do it, we actually put the last 20% of the race. So like, if you're with someone in the last 20 miles and you're kind of running side by side, and again, they've helped you through a low moment, they've slowed down for you when you're grinding, and you've slowed down for them when they're grinding, it just changes the nature of the race.
Look,
That's a good point.
That makes me think, I'm going to bring this up for both of your opinion. You're having a bad day. It's not a race day, it's a trail day. And you've run this trail countless times. You know your way. You're not going to get lost. It's one of those trails. And you're just suffering and you don't want to go fast. And you say to your running partner, I got this, you go on. And I know my way back and I'm going to be fine. And just please go away from me. What do you think about that moment? When is it permissible to let that runner to hang back and just kind of, slog through the rest of the race? You know they're going to be safe. It's not going to get dark on them. There isn't a cougar that's going to jump on their back and take care of business. Do you say, no, I'm going to stay with you no matter what? We don't leave you here on this trail. Or do you say, I respect you. I know what you're asking. And if I ask, I'd want you to let me trail behind and get back on my own pace and capacity that day. What's your opinion on that? In this scenario, you are the companion runner that's feeling better, and the person has said that wants to kind of hang back a bit. What do you do with that, Jimmy?
Case by case basis.
All right.
There's no rule that applies there. Some runner might say, leave me, and not want you to leave them.
Right.
If I'm the companion runner, I might have a goal that day that is in jeopardy or not. Like, the context there matters.
Okay.
If my wife says, I'm fine, I don't want to talk about it, she probably still needs to talk about it. So you just have to know your training partner or the person that you've just met on the trail for the first time. Context matters. And, I've had races where I was running hard at a particular time goal, where if someone told me to leave, I was leaving. And I've had other days where, I'm grinding through a time that's not going to be within hours of what I intended, and someone tells me to leave them, and I have no incentive to make that happen. And again, like, knowing some people are going to tell you to leave them because they want to be left alone, and some people are going to tell you to leave them because they don't want you to miss your goal because of them.
Yeah.
Good point.
Context matters.
Any thoughts on it, Scott?
I agree. Context matters. I would say, because more times than not, I've been the person that says, go on without me. I've been on the other side. And in many cases, I don't want to hinder the training day or the race that they are running. And in many cases, I'm pushing myself harder than I should to keep up. And by giving them that permission, I'm also giving myself permission that I need to back off and take care of myself. So
yeah, I think a good time to set those ground rules is early on, maybe days or weeks or months before, saying, hey, when this happens to us, this is how we'll handle it. I think it's a good social contract to create, when everybody's feeling good. So you can call back to that.
Yeah, training partners going to the same race. There's a whole litany of different ways to experience that race. And if you're experiencing, 90% of your long runs together, sometimes you go into that race planning to run together, and sometimes you both plan to do your own thing. So, having a conversation about it is positive. Like knowing what both people's ideas and expectations are can lead to less hurt feelings on race day.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, I've been there where I early on trained with a certain partner, and my expectation going into this 50K was we're going to run the whole thing together. And 20 miles in, I'm alone, and I was pretty ticked off about that for a while. Very ticked off. And if we should have had the conversation beforehand.
Yeah, knowing what both people's expectations and goals and plans are is really important. And again, I hate to use the marital analogy, but if you're not on the same page with your spouse, you're definitely both have different expectations about stuff. So communication can lead to an enhanced experience for both runners.
Well, trail running is a microcosm of life, right? So there you go. Once again, it holds true.
And maybe, just maybe, a better human being. All right. Hey, this has been a fun conversation, and we're going a little bit longer than we normally do, but we have one left, and that is there are many I's in team, and I's being EYES. There are many I's in team.
Yeah, the joke of that old tired sports saying of there's no I in team, i.e., like get rid of your individual goals. You're a part of a bigger group. And our play on that is eyeballs. There are many eyeballs in team. And this was something to remember that however we behave and however we interact with people, while we're wearing, the Coyote jersey or logo, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing this whole group. And similar to that is, I live in Southern California. When I go run a race in Colorado, when I show up in the results, I'm representing the state of California and Los Angeles. And I'm, how I represent myself is going to be many people's one experience of that place, of that group. So as a Coyote, as a Californian, as a male, like in every sort of sense, however someone labels or categorizes me, I want to represent myself in a way that gives people a positive memory or experience of that. Like, oh, I know trail runners from LA. They're awesome down there. Like, oh, I met this Coyote and, this race in Virginia, and they helped me out. And so I always tried to remind people like that it's such a communal tribal experience that when you are behaving in a way in your best moment, in your worst moment, be memorable for the right reasons.
Good stuff. Boy, Jimmy, now if somebody is in Southern California or in that region, how do you get connected? Do you have openings for young Coyotes to come in? How do you get involved?
Pups.
Yeah. So the Coyotes have existed in sort of three different categories over the years. The longest standing of which is our Thursday morning community trail run. I'm not sure that it's going to be a trail run anytime soon, but we will still be meeting on Thursday mornings. This week we'll be running through the non-evacuated parts of Brentwood, South Brentwood, around the Brentwood Country Club, and meeting up at a coffee shop just to have that community and that support. But we've met at 6:10 or 6:09 a.m. on Thursday mornings, 51 Thursdays a year for 17 of the last 18 years.
Wow.
And if you find us on Instagram, Coyote Running, at Coyote Running, we have a Facebook page that was, we don't always post on anymore. We have a website, coyoterunning.com, that has a Thursday morning calendar. Again, we're not going to be following the calendar right now because it's all trailheads. But just getting connected to that Instagram, we will be posting, Tuesday or Wednesday night where we're going to meet the next day. We start the run at 6:20, and people run at any pace that feels right to them and any distance that feels right to them. Most of our runs are out and backs. And we've supported all levels and backgrounds. It's been a very dynamic and diverse community of runners over the last 18 years. And you can find me at Coach Jimmy Dean on Instagram and Twitter, although I don't tweet anymore. But God, they don't even call it Twitter anymore. On X or whatever it's called.
That's right.
But coyoterunning.com and at Coyote Running on Instagram, at Jimmy Dean Freeman. Those are the easiest ways to access what we're doing. We used to have a large group training program for local marathons and ultra distance races. Now I'm doing full one-on-one coaching individuals. And I work with people that are couch to marathon. I work with people that are trying to run their first sub 24 100, their first 100, Boston qualifying marathon. I coach people of all levels and abilities. And that's how to find us.
Nice.
Thank you, Jimmy. I think that these 10 or 11 still hold up. I think you mentioned in the end of the video, it's not a comprehensive list, but a sample of our attitude and our aspirations as trail runners. So we hope that people listen to this, and if you weren't aware, kind of internalize some of these aspirations and become a better steward to the trail. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and you guys, thanks for having me.
And go out and watch that video that Scott's going to post in show notes. It's great how it's done. Very professional and very entertaining and worth watching. So it's
and done back in 2012, which is really amazing. Some of the graphics and that's, we didn't have all the tools we have now. So it's pretty impressive.
A bittersweet piece of that is 90% of that video is trails that just burned. So watch the video and realize the beauty of the trails that we were running. And those are almost all South Santa Monica Mountain Range. There's a couple of Angeles Crest 100 video segments, and there's a couple of Leona Divide segments. But it's going to serve as a bookmark in time of what things look like. Nice.
I remember somewhere during the show, Ryan, I asked you to remind us of something at the close. The coyote. So if
the
you
Coyote Howl.
If you hear that, it may be a fellow coyote out there that's out on the trails.
If you hear it, lace up your shoes and go out and run.
Maz.